There's nothing left to say right now.
Hi, crew. Welcome back to the only channel that delivers you the courtroom reality behind the polished veneer. Today, we take you inside the 48 minutes that imploded Kody Brown's meticulously spun story, and how a silent courtroom in Flagstaff is where decades of manipulation, gaslighting, and financial dishonesty finally came crashing down. Before the gavel fell, before the crying, before the verdict, it was silent. The courtroom was not a circus. No cameras, no reality television lights, only the muted hum of lawyers preparing folders, the scratch, thump scratch of pens on yellow legal pads, and the whispered fear that clung to one side of the aisle. On one bench, Kody Brown and Janelle Brown formerly, wives number 2 and number 3. But today, plaintiffs, women, mothers, warriors. On the other, Kody and Robyn Brown, with their attorneys, eyes scanning the room, behind a confidence mask already fraying at the edges. It wasn't family drama that brought us here. It wasn't a broken up relationship or wounded egos. It was a civil lawsuit filed in Arizona Family Court, Brown v. Brown, charging breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and it all began because of the same thing: money, control, power, deception. But even more than that, it was the result of a greater betrayal, the betrayal of trust in a family that presented themselves to the world as unified, faith-based, and moral. For years, the fans were given the illusion, the contemporary plural family overcoming challenges and rejoicing in their differences. But if you looked hard enough, you could see the cracks. If you listened closely, you could hear the silence where there should have been truth. And now, in this courtroom, the truth had stood ready to be heard. Let's turn back. Before the trial, before the lawsuit, to the early shakes of failure. Because this tale, as all the finest court dramas do, did not begin in a courtroom. It began in a living room. It began with hushed fights behind closed doors, with emails going unresponded, with wives turning away, not in fury, but in weariness. Kody was the first to leave. Her departure wasn't dramatic. It was cutthroat. She packed, she departed, and she never glanced back. Initially, viewers believed it was a personal decision, but subsequent came Janelle. Soon after, and the narrative changed. These weren't random exits. These were planned exits. Women regaining control after being kept on the fringes for years. They had suspicions about money, about decisions being made without their input, about favoritism that was no longer subtle. But suspicions weren't enough. They needed proof. And that proof came in the form of financial statements, pay stubs, contracts, and perhaps most devastating of all, the testimony of someone on the inside, Mindy Jessup, Robyn's niece, the family nanny. But we'll get to that. For now, we're in the courtroom. As the session got underway, the judge, a grizzled man with a reputation for being level-headed and unflappable, ordered both sides to stand. There were no grandstanding objections, no opening speeches, just opening statements. But even those were revealing. Kody and Janelle's attorney, Miss Anna Sharma, presented it with knife-sharp accuracy. "This is not a case of marital discord," she declared. "This is a case of willful financial dishonesty, of emotional cruelty disguised as religious guidance, of women being informed they are part of a team while being progressively excluded from decisions, finances, and reality." On the other side, Kody's defense team tried to paint a different picture. Their attorney, Mr. Silas Croft, argued that this was nothing more than a messy breakup being dramatized for attention, that the plaintiffs were bitter, misinformed, and financially compensated all along. But as we'll soon see, the documents and the witnesses would tell a very different story. Kody himself appeared agitated throughout the first hour, shifted in his seat, clenched his jaw. Robyn held onto his arm for dear life, and yet neither of them appeared to have a clue what was going to come next. Because when the initial piece of evidence was presented, a bank transfer between Family Traditions LLC and a shell company called KN Holdings, the atmosphere shifted, and suddenly, this wasn't about love. It was about fraud, and that was just the start. The courtroom was no longer silent. Once the opening statements were made, the atmosphere thickened with expectation. It wasn't only the judge, the jury, and the attorneys who sensed it. It was Kody himself. For once, The man who was accustomed to taking over the space in the room had nowhere to go. His highly constructed image, the charming leader, the misinterpreted patriarch, was starting to fray. Christine and Janelle's lawyers were ready. They came equipped with a timeline, receipts, and plan. The coming hours would systematically break down the public image of Kody Brown and reveal the private financial empire he and Robyn had supposedly built behind closed doors. Let's rewind. For years, Kody had preached unity, a universal family dream. Coyote Pass was to be the crowning achievement, a ranch property on which all the wives would one day construct homes and live in peace. But whereas the dream had been peddled to viewers and to the women themselves, the actuality was brutally otherwise. The attorney for the plaintiffs, Miss Anna Sharma, started to present evidence of a two-track financial system. There was the Family Traditions, LLC, a legal entity formed with the goal of holding the common family assets, such as royalties from TLC, property, and joint business ventures. Christine and Janelle were included in this entity. So were Meri and, at least in paper, Robyn and Kody. But then there was something else. A second entity, one that they had never been informed about. Fair Holdings, LLC. It wasn't mentioned at any joint family gatherings. It wasn't alluded to in budgets. It wasn't addressed at family councils, but it showed up again and again in the bank statements. As shown in documents brought to the courtroom, Fair Holdings had frequent, sizable deposits made to it by Family Traditions, LLC. Those deposits started approximately around late 2019, roughly when Christine started questioning the direction of the family finances. Sharma cast the wire transfers onto a screen that the court could see, one after another, each one highlighted, dated, and tracing back to the joint account. They were not insignificant amounts. $10,000, $15,000, occasionally $20,000, the recipient's core holdings. Who owned Fair Holdings? Kody Nathan Brown and Robyn Alice Brown, just the two of them. The courtroom buzzed. On the bench with the plaintiff, Christine was calm. But her eyes did not leave Kody. Janelle's face didn't betray her emotion, but her fists were tightly clenched in her lap. Sharma put it in a case file format. The plaintiffs were informed there wasn't enough money to construct on Coyote Pass. They were instructed to wait on home construction, to wait for the market. Robyn's house, a 5-bedroom home on 2 acres, a sprawling property, was meanwhile being financed and furnished, and the payments to their nanny, Miss Mindy Jessup, as we'll cover in full in Part 4, those also came from Fair Holdings. But Sharma wasn't done. She then introduced evidence that shocked even seasoned courtroom reporters, internal emails. One email, dated April 2020, showed Kody requesting a disbursement from Family Traditions LLC to cover unexpected security upgrades for the Flagstaff residents. The disbursement, $30,000. Sharma traced the money. In 48 hours, that money went from Family Traditions into Fair Holdings, and then into a payment to a private home security firm. The Flagstaff address in question, Robyn's house. Christine and Janelle never authorized the expenditure. They didn't even know it was done. This wasn't merely an accounting error. This was a fiduciary breach, but, at this point, Kody's defense counsel objected. They argued the plaintiffs had every record, and that the expenditures were in the name of family security. But the records indicated otherwise, and when the judge permitted the emails and transfers into evidence, the court changed again. This was no longer a case of he said, she said. This was a paper trail, and the trail was devastating. Sharma summarized the segment with a visual comparison. 2 columns, promise delivered equal investment in land only. Robyn had a finished home, equal access to funds. Robyn's expenses approved. Others rejected shared decision. Making financial books hidden as this was presented to the jury, Kody noticeably tensed. Robyn sat stiffly, eyes fixed forward. The facade of the shared dream was shattering. And this was only the first part. By this time, the courtroom was alert. The relaxed looks and courteous smiles were forgotten. The jury leaned forward in their chairs. The court reporter pounded away with renewed vigor. Even the bailiff, his usual stone face, blinked more rapidly as the evidence accumulated. What had started out as a squalid domestic argument was transforming into a full-fledged financial scandal. And then Anna Sharma did what all master lawyers do. She brought the jury from theory to fact. She called her next witness, a forensic accountant. This was not some litigant with a personal vendetta or emotional baggage. This was an outside expert, retained to break down and analyze one thing: money flow. And he didn't let her down. The accountant brought in a complete audit of Family Traditions, LLC, KNFAR Holdings, and a number of other accounts associated with both. He explained how more than $300,000 had been transferred from the joint family account to KNFAR Holdings within a span of less than 2 years. The pattern of spending changed significantly after Robyn's house was bought. There wasn't an evident paper trail sanctioning many of the transactions. No signed permissions by Christine, Janelle, or Meri. Every payment was backed up. Ledger printouts, wire confirmations, email attachments. One payment in particular shocked the room: a $25,000 payment by Family Traditions titled Legal Retainer Fay Estate Planning. But the law firm verified that the payment had in fact been for a trust deed amendment, for a property all in Robyn's name alone. In plain English, family funds paid to establish Robyn's sole ownership of a family-bought property. Christine dropped her eyes. Janelle sat motionless. The accountant hesitated, then added a last footnote. Had this money stayed in Family Traditions, LLC, there would have been adequate capital for 2 more homes constructed on the Coyote Pass land by late 2021. 2 houses, one for Janelle, one for Christine. Houses that never existed. Why? Because the cash was already spent. Kody's lawyer attempted to justify that shared family expenses are inherently complicated in plural households. But the figures didn't lie, and neither did the LLC filings, all signed by Kody and Robyn themselves. Then, the exhibits. Exhibit 42A, 42B, 42C. These were bank statements willingly produced by Mindy Jessup, the nanny and insider whose testimony would later turn the trial on its head. They indicated consistent deposits, every other Friday, to her account, from KNFAR Holdings, each of them perfectly timed. Every other Friday, like clockwork, the amount $3,076.92 per deposit, annually $80,000. Sharma did the calculations on a slide. Then she addressed the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, this was at a time when Janelle was being informed that she couldn't afford a foundation, when Christine was being informed that the family fund was too strained to help with relocation, when budgets for groceries were cut, and yet one household employee was being paid executive-level salary. The courtroom fell silent, but only briefly, because the next thing on Sharma's agenda was arguably the most contentious: the TLC deals. Fans had long wondered how much the Browns were compensated. Speculation ran from millions to tens of millions. But here in this courtroom, the figures were no longer a mystery. The court was provided with copies of contract revisions from the network, dated 2018, Fay 2022. They detailed a base payment per episode to the family of $180,000 bonuses based on viewer metrics lump, some promotional payments for book tie, ins, and podcast guest spots. It amounted to the millions. But here was the twist. Those checks were written to one recipient entity, Family Traditions, LLC. But the disbursements, completely unaccounted for after 2019. Where did the funds go? Sharma displayed a 3D pie chart on the screen. It was horribly simplistic. 87% of disbursed funds, KNFAR Holdings 9%, unknown transfers to cash accounts 4%. Miscellaneous expenses, legal, tax, utilities. Christine and Janelle never received a penny of the show as funds after season 14, aside from appearance fees. Robyn's Amazon wish lists were granted each week. The pretense was crumbling. The shared family business had turned into a personal pipeline, a kingdom, governed by 2. The last part of the segment added one more piece of information: Christine's blocked efforts to get the books. Emails indicated her asking for a complete financial analysis in 2021, only to be informed that access was being restructured for legal reasons. The emails were addressed by Kody. This was not exclusion. It was deliberate obfuscation. By this time, the judge requested a recess, and as the jury filed out of the room, one of them, a 50-year-old woman, shook her head in incredulity. The truth was no longer buried in feeling. It was buried in documents, and now it had been uncovered. If the papers verified the hypothesis, the testimony of Mindy Jessup ignited it. When Anna Sharma called her forward, the courtroom changed. A silence swept across the gallery, as if everyone intuitively knew that what was about to occur would alter everything. Mindy Jessup was not a plaintiff. She was not a sister wife. She was not a fan or an internet detective. She was something far more sinister. An insider, Robyn Brown's niece, the family nanny, a woman integrated within the Flagstaff family for almost 3 years. She witnessed the things no one else saw. She knew what the cameras did not. And today, under oath, she was prepared to talk. She walked toward the stand with quiet determination. A plain gray blazer, hair drawn back tightly, no cosmetics, no theatrics. Just there. The kind of there that claims, I know what I saw, and I won't be afraid to admit it. Court transcript based on dramatized insider sources. Miss Sharma. State your full name for the record. Mindy Jessup. Mindy Alice Jessup. Miss Sharma. Miss Jessup. You are related to the defendant, Robyn Brown. How? Mindy Jessup. She is my aunt, my mom's sister. Miss Sharma. And are you related to Robyn's children as well? Mindy Jessup, through my dad? Yeah, I am their half-sister, Dayton, Aurora, and Brianna. Miss Sharma, you were close to the family. Mindy Jessup, I was. Miss Sharma, were you ever worked by Robyn and Kody Brown? Mindy Jessup? Yes, I was their nanny from late 2019 to mid-2022. I also did some homeschooling and household duties. Miss Sharma, how many days a week did you work, Mindy Jessup? 5 or 6 days a week, 8 to 10 hours a day. That response fell like a weight in the room. This wasn't someone who popped in. She wasn't a one-off babysitter. She was there, a part of their daily lives, a fly on the wall. Sharma constructed the foundation first, where she worked, how much, what she observed, and then, with the serenity of one laying the last card on a tottering palace of deceptions, she turned, Miss Sharma, and who issued your paychecks? Mindy Jessup, Fair Holdings. Miss Sharma, not Robyn or Kody Brown themselves. Mindy Jessup, number the bank transfers were from Fair Holdings. Sharma didn't waste time on the salary figure, $80,000 per annum. Documented in bank records, deposited bi-weekly. Same account associated with the family fund withdrawals. But appetizer only. Miss Sharma, when you were working at the home, did you notice discussions between Kody and Robyn about the plaintiffs, Christine and Janelle, Mindy Jessup? Yes, often, Miss Sharma. Can you provide a specific example? Mindy Jessup. There was a moment during fall of 2020. Christine had phoned about requiring Kody to attend Isabel's surgery. He was storming around the living room, fuming, he exclaimed. She is not the head of this family. I am. She doesn't get to make my schedule. Miss Sharma. And what did Robyn say, Mindy Jessup? She told him. She is manipulating you. She is guilt, tripping you off of Isabel's pain. You have to be strong. If you give in now, they'll all think they can call you. Silence. Miss Sharma. So Christine's daughter's spinal surgery was perceived as a power play. Mindy Jessup. That is how they discussed it. The courtroom was silent. Kody had the look of having been punched. But Mindy wasn't finished. She testified that she saw Robyn and Kody speak of Christine and Janelle as the noise, that they were talking openly about restricting access to money, blocking calls, even rehearsing with one another how to be victimized on camera. They weren't attempting to maintain the family. They were building a story, and then came the shocking revelation. Miss Sharma, did you ever notice bank statements from Fair Holdings, Mindy Jessup? Yes, they weren't very discreet. Sometimes things were sitting on the counter or lying open on the office computer. Miss Sharma, what did you see, Mindy Jessup? I saw normal deposits from Family Traditions LLC. I saw account balances over $200,000. I also saw deposit slips from TLC and my sister wife's closet. Miss Sharma, did you ever overhear Kody and Robyn talking about these transfers? Mindy Jessup? Yes. They referred to it as the nest egg, that it was for the little ones, that the older children did not comprehend long-term planning. Christine let out a sigh. Janelle glanced at the jury. The remainder of Mindy's testimony supported all that the documents implied, that Kody and Robyn had successfully privatized family wealth, that they utilized COVID as a means of enforcing isolation, that they portrayed the other wives as irresponsible, while indulging spendthrift, and most importantly, they weren't merely players in the downfall of the family, they planned it. When Sharma concluded her questioning, the courtroom was abuzz. But the defense wasn't going to let this pass without challenge. Mr. Croft walked up to the stand with a smirk. Mr. Croft, Miss Jessup, you are earning $80,000 a year from my clients. That is a pretty penny, Mindy Jessup. Yes, Mr. Croft. And yet, here you are, testifying against them. Did they terminate your employment? Mindy Jessup. Number I left. Mr. Croft. Or were you driven away after being caught spilling information to Christine? Mindy Jessup. I left to preserve my peace. Mr. Croft. You expect this court to find that you are impartial. Mindy Jessup. I expect this court to hear the truth. He tried. He really did. But each question only made her appear tougher, more transparent, more believable. Mr. Croft. Then, why now? Why come forward after accepting that salary? Mindy Jessup, because I was afraid, because I loved those children, and because silence would make me complicit. And with that, the courtroom breathed a collective sigh of relief. This wasn't a mad employee. This was a whistleblower. And her truth just shattered the final shred of Kody and Robyn's delusion. The courtroom had already been cracked open, but what was coming next would rip it wide apart, with financial deception exposed. Anna Sharma turned the attention not to additional bank statements or contracts, but to something more sinister, something more heartless, something everyone in the courtroom could sense, not just know, emotional manipulation. And it all revolved around one thing: the COVID-19 rules. Rules that ripped families apart. Rules that Kody used as a weapon. Rules which Mindy Jessup was prepared to reveal. She returned to the stand for redirect testimony. Her voice remained firm. Her eyes didn't waver. This wasn't about money any longer. This was about the trauma which continued to reverberate through Christine and Janelle's children. Miss Sharma, Miss Jessup, I'd like to speak with you about the time from March 2020 through late 2021. The peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. You were still employed by the Browns at that time, right? Mindy Jessup. Yes, I was there almost every day. Miss Sharma, and you were aware of the COVID protocols Kody Brown imposed on the family. Mindy Jessup, very much so. We had laminated copies printed out and hung on the kitchen wall. No guests, no grocery runs, no interacting with anyone outside the central family. Miss Sharma, were these policies followed rigidly by everyone? Mindy Jessup. Number silence. Miss Sharma, please explain. Mindy Jessup, the parents came over frequently. Her sister Tarilis brought over her children. Utah friends came over. I witnessed them hugged. I witnessed them having dinner with Kody. I witnessed them laughing by the fire pit. Miss Sharma. And these were unmasked gatherings. Mindy Jessup, totally unmasked. No distancing, gasps. Miss Sharma, during this time, were Christine and Janelle's kids permitted to visit? Mindy Jessup, number Gabriel was labeled a risk because he worked retail. Garrison wasn't allowed near the property. Even Janelle was told to quarantine for 2 weeks after going to the pharmacy. Miss Sharma, but Robyn's family. Mindy Jessup, they were labeled safe, trusted they were. In Robyn's words, our circle. Miss Sharma. Did Kody know this was inconsistent, Mindy Jessup? Oh, sure, I've heard him once say, they'll never learn. The crew's not even working at present. Miss Sharma. He was talking about the other wives, wasn't he, Mindy Jessup? Yes. Mindy hesitated. Then, taking a breath that apparently gathered all the strength she possessed, she went on and said, Mindy Jessup, I recall one evening, Christine had called. She was sobbing. Isabel had just asked why her daddy wouldn't attend her surgery. Robyn silenced the phone. Kody said, she is guilt-tripping me using the surgery. She knows the rules, Robyn said. Then let her feel the consequences. And at that point, the room shattered. Not out loud, not dramatically, but profoundly. Christine brushed a tear away. So did one of the jurors. Because now it was obvious. The regulations weren't about health. They were about control. They were an experiment. And Christine, Janelle, and their families failed. Not because they were unhealthy, but because they were inconvenient. Mindy's voice broke for the first time. Mindy Jessup, I was there. I witnessed the double standard. I witnessed Kody embracing Robyn's father while refusing to call his own son. I witnessed him drinking wine at a birthday party while informing Christine that her daughter needed to heal in solitude. I witnessed the worst of him, and the worst of Robyn. They utilized the pandemic as an excuse to exclude the rest of the family. They used it to explain what they always sought: isolation, monogamy, control. Silence, Miss Sharma remained silent for some seconds. Then softly, Miss Sharma, no further questions. Your Honor, the court recessed. But nobody got up. They sat there silently, allowing it to sink in, allowing it to sting. For all the lies on the pages, it was the emotional abandonment that touched the greatest chord. The jury had viewed the figures. Now, they'd viewed the fissures in the family's soul. Outside the courtroom, reporters were already live, broadcasting. Tweets were flying through the air, fans were shocked. But in that room, nobody was concerned about the headlines, because the truth had just been spoken, and its name was Mindy Jessup, to be continued in Part Faye. The judge delivers his verdict, because as the world was hearing Mindy's truth, the judge was about to deliver a verdict that would stun even the most die-hard Sister Wives fans. A decision that wouldn't only take Kody's money or his reputation, but all. The courtroom was filled to capacity. Camera crews crowded the stairs outside, though they were not permitted in legal correspondence live. Tweeted show fans. Some crestfallen, others vindicated, tracked every step remotely. There was no glamour inside, only tension. Kody and Robyn sat rigidly at their table. His face pulled taut, jaw set. Robyn's hands shook under the table. Rosary held so hard the beads formed impressions in her hand. Christine and Janelle didn't flinch. They weren't optimistic. They weren't nervous. They were prepared. 48 minutes. That is how long it took to reach a verdict. A civil case so complicated, money, contracts, emotional distress, should have required deliberation days. But when the facts are irrefutable and the truth is by name, 48 minutes suffices. The jury returned to the courtroom. 12 men and women, each of them transformed by what they had heard. None of them looked at Kody. None of them looked at Robyn. Most looked at Christine and Janelle. The judge went back to the bench. He studied the verdict form. No emotion passed over his face. Then he nodded and turned to the room. Judge, in the case of Brown v. Brown, the court finds as follows. On the count of breach of fiduciary duty, for the plaintiffs. On the count of unjust enrichment, for the plaintiffs. On the count of intentional infliction of emotional distress, for the plaintiffs. Gasps filled the room. Kody leaned back in his chair. Robyn put a hand over her mouth. Christine closed her eyes. Janelle clung to the armrest as if it were a lifeline in a hurricane. But the judge wasn't finished. Judge, the court has considered the damages as presented and confirms the following awards: reimbursement of Coyote Pass investments, Faye TLC revenue redistribution, Faye B million liquidation of KN Fayar holdings and all assets contained therein, emotional damages, Faye apiece to Christine and Janelle Brown. Tears welled up in Robyn's eyes. Not soggy, understanding tears, but frantic, dizzying tears of a castle crumbling around you. Stunned, furious. Bewildered, Kody stared. Judge, in addition, the court commands instant financial disclosure of all remaining Brown property and imposes a temporary freeze on the Coyote Pass development accounts, pending full compliance confirmation. It was complete. It was absolute. Christine breathed. Janelle swept away one tear, and Mindy Jessup, sitting in the back row, motionless, silent, watching justice creep up slowly. Like morning, the verdict wasn't just about money. It was about validation. After years of being gaslit on national TV told, they were selfish, unfaithful, undeserving, Christine and Janelle now possessed something even more powerful than public opinion: the law. But the moment that actually shattered the room came a few seconds later, when the judge inquired, "Judge, do the plaintiffs desire to make a closing statement?" Christine rose, not as a star of a reality show, not as a plaintiff, but as a woman who'd struggled too long to be heard. Christine, no statement. Your Honor. Just, thank you. The judge nodded. Janelle stood by her side. And the two of them walked out of the courtroom. Heads held high. Their steps measured, their truth finally spoken. Kody didn't go along with them. He didn't rise. He didn't say a word, and Robyn. She turned her face away from the gallery, from the jury, from the truth. This was not a decision, it was a reckoning. And as the courtroom cleared, the whispers began. What would Kody do next? Would Robyn appeal? Would the show survive? Outside, the wind whipped up in Flagstaff. The mountains towered like silent witnesses, and the courthouse steps, which were originally constructed for justice, now carried the footsteps of a family undone. But crew, we're not done yet, because while the court may have ruled, there's one more bombshell waiting in the wings. One final testimony the judge didn't allow in open court. Lone truth still hidden in sealed records. Lone secret that, if it ever sees the light of day, might not just end the show. It might end the freedom of one of its stars. Some courtrooms ring with noise even after the trial has passed. This one rang with silence. The kind of silence that carries the weight of decades. The silence of women who had been instructed to smile for the cameras and hold the family together for too long. The silence that comes after the truth has finally been realized. Christine and Janelle said nothing to the media outside. They didn't have to. The verdict had spoken for them. They walked together, surrounded by their lawyers and a few supporters. No makeup teams. No reality crew. Just two women standing in the morning light, free at last. Free of the gaslighting. Free of the performance. Free of the system that had, all these years, paid them to be silent and beaten them for being free. They didn't scream. They didn't celebrate. They breathed out. And in that breath, generations of stifled voices breathed alongside them. Inside, the consequences started right away. The court clerk delivered the signed verdict to the county office. The order was stamped. KNFAR holdings would have to be liquidated within 90 days. Discovery requests were being rushed. Kody and Robyn's lawyers seemed frantic, thumbing through papers, already practicing damage control. Robyn didn't cry, she wept. But not for justice, for loss, for exposure, for the demise of the fairy tale she had co-authored, and the reality that now had the potential to erase her altogether. Kody, he wouldn't even meet anyone's eye, muttered. Paste. Snap shouted at his staff. He whispered. They never loved me. And yet, deep inside, even he was aware. It wasn't about love. It was about being held accountable. Later that evening, Christine shared a single sentence on her Instagram story. Some truths don't need to be screamed. They just need to be heard. Janelle did not post anything. She did not have to. The fan community went wild. Number Justice for Christine trended globally. Sister wives, message boards, podcasters, and YouTube personalities went ablaze with responses. But nothing could quite put into words what this verdict truly was. Because this was about more than one family. This was for every woman who has ever been instructed to be thankful for less. Every wife instructed to wait her turn. Every daughter who saw her mother shrink to fit someone else's concept of love. This judgment was for them too. And it hurt because it verified that the narrative we were sold on television, the unity, the love, the divine purpose, was a deception. Not simply edited, not simply scripted, engineered. And that is when the letter came out. An anonymous email to a reporter who had been writing about the case. Date, stamped, confirmed, and chilling. Its title, Kody's Last Secret Sealed Testimony, signed NDA, hidden name. Its contents, an allegation made in a sealed deposition ordered by the judge on Kody's attorney's request, in which testimony implicated a former executive of TLC in fiscal mismanagement of show payments. It suggested potential wire fraud North Dakota as signed under duress, and most astonishingly, the identity of a federal investigator purportedly investigating the situation. In the event it proved true, this was no longer a civil case. It was the start of something much larger. And as the showrunners grappled, and lawyers murmured behind withheld documents, a certain phrase reverberated in the minds of all who watched. If Christine and Janelle possessed the fortitude to reveal the deception. What else remains concealed in the vault of Coyote Pass? Some shows end with cheers. Some end with tears. But the Brown family's story, it ends with a question. What was it all about? For years, audiences were sold a dream of plural marriage, of divine mission, of strength, despite struggle. We were brought into Christine's, Janelle's, Meri's, Robyn's, and Kody's living rooms. We laughed with them, wept with them, grew with them, but behind the production timelines and confessionals, there were actual wounds, actual children, actual heartache. And now, in the ruins of once, being America's most famous plural family, only two women are standing firm with their dignity, Christine and Janelle. Women who did not want to be a footnote in someone else's story. women who emerged from behind the story and took their own back. They didn't set out to be heroes, but they ended up being them anyway. The judge's verdict was final, but the story isn't over. Not yet. K& Fair Holdings is under forensic review. TLC has yet to issue a public statement, and the sealed deposition mentioned in the anonymous letter, it's real. We've confirmed that much. But as with everything in the world of reality television, what's real and what's revealed are never the same thing. So to you, the viewer, the believer, the witness, stay alert, since next season may not be shot in Flagstaff. It could be tried in federal court. And when that gavel comes down, we'll be here, waiting, observing. Sharing the story, the network won't. Thanks for joining us on this journey. If you sensed reality in these words, if you stood with Christine, Janelle, and every woman ever silenced for someone else's image, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this story. Because silence is how the lie endured. But truth is how we finish it. We'll see you in the next one, crew. Stay sharp, stay brave, stay free.